I let my best friend and fiance think I vanished. Their Reddit post told me everything. 3 weeks ago, I did something that I can't take back. I disappeared. My fiance thought I was dead. My best friend thought I'd abandoned him. And the entire time, I was watching them process my absence from a distance. But here's the thing that changed everything. I found out what they were really saying about me when they thought nobody was listening. And what I discovered made me question whether either of them ever really knew me at all. This is the story of how a simple Reddit post unraveled everything I thought I understood about the people closest to me. Let me take you back about 4 months. My name is Daniel, and I had what most people would call a perfect life. I was engaged to Rachel, this incredibly intelligent woman who worked in architectural design. We'd been together for 6 years. She had this specific laugh, kind of high-pitched and genuine, that she only did when she was genuinely delighted. Not just polite laughing, it was rare. I love that laugh. We lived in a renovated brownstone in Brooklyn. Nothing too fancy, but ours. My best friend was Marcus. We'd known each other since 7th grade. That's 23 years of friendship. He was my best man, obviously. Marcus worked in sound design for indie films, and he had this nervous habit where he'd tap his fingers against whatever surface was closest whenever he was thinking through a problem. You could literally watch his brain work if you paid attention. Everything about my life felt ordered, predictable, safe. Every weekday morning, Rachel would wake up before me. She was an early riser, and she'd head downstairs to make coffee, without fail. At 6:47 a.m., I'd hear the coffee machine whir to life. I could time my alarm by it. She'd bring me a cup at 7:15, kiss my forehead, and head to the shower. Then I'd get up, get dressed, and we'd have maybe 10 minutes together before one of us had to leave for work. On Fridays, Marcus and I had a standing tradition. We'd meet at this little dive bar called the Copper Penny around 7 p.m. Same corner booth, same bartender, guy named Tony, who'd make Marcus his usual dark and stormy without being asked. It was ritual, it was comfort. But here's where the story actually begins. And this is the detail I need you to pay attention to. About 3 months ago, I started noticing something small, inconsequential really. Rachel would leave me notes, just little things. Love you, have a good day, on Post-its stuck to my laptop. Don't forget the dry cleaning on our kitchen calendar. Nothing unusual, except one Thursday morning in October, I noticed something odd. The handwriting on the note was different, just slightly. The letters were the same. The message was the same. Your 7 p.m. dentist appointment, don't be late. But something about the slant was off. The Y in your had a different loop, sharper. Less of Rachel's careful, architectural precision. I held the note up to the light, examining it like some kind of forensic expert. Rachel's handwriting was distinctive, perfect almost. She used to hand-letter designs before going digital. This note, this note looked like someone trying to copy her handwriting, someone who was 97% successful, but that final 3% of failure was screaming at me. When Rachel came home that night, I didn't mention it. I didn't want to seem paranoid or controlling. Instead, I watched her. Not in a creepy way, at least I didn't think so at the time. I paid attention to small things. How she held her pen, the way her hand moved across paper. When she wrote down our grocery list that evening, it was perfect. Distinctly Rachel. But I'd kept that note from the morning. I compared them. The one from the morning, the one with the appointment reminder, didn't match. I told myself I was being crazy. Stress at work, too much coffee, my brain filling in patterns that didn't exist. This is something our minds do, right? We're pattern recognition machines. We see faces in clouds and conspiracies in coincidences. So I let it go. But then it happened again. The following week, Tuesday morning, another note on my coffee mug. Made you breakfast, it's in the fridge. ER. The R at the end was signed in red pen. Rachel always used red pen for her signature. Except this R, the letter was too tall, The curve was too rounded. It wasn't her hand. This time I didn't stay calm. I actually felt my chest tighten. A small, cold knot formed right behind my ribs. That night I asked Rachel casually, way too casually, which made it not casual at all, if she'd left me a note on Tuesday. She looked confused. She said she'd been in a back-to-back meeting all morning until noon. She hadn't been home. But someone had left a note in our apartment. She thought I was joking. I showed her the note. She read it, and I watched her face go through something. Not shock exactly. More like concern. The kind of concern you have when someone you love is acting strange. Daniel, I didn't write that, she said. Simple, direct. I believe her. I did then. I do now. The question was, who did? So here's what I did. I know how this sounds, but I did it anyway. I started collecting the notes. Over the next 10 days, there were 4 more notes, all left in places Rachel frequented. One on her pillow, a side note since I usually made the bed. One on the kitchen counter, stuck to the coffee maker. 2 more on random days, left on our front stoop inside a small envelope. Each one was in her handwriting, except it wasn't. The inconsistencies were small enough that if you weren't looking for them, you'd miss them completely. But I was looking. I was obsessing. I kept the notes in a manila folder in my desk at work. My colleagues thought I was losing it. They were probably right. The handwriting was close, disturbingly close. Close enough that it had fooled me for days. Close enough that Rachel's own eyes wouldn't catch it immediately. But the more I compared them to notes Rachel had actually written, old greeting cards, messages in margins of books, her signature on contracts, the more obvious the forgeries became. Here's what really got under my skin, though. The content of the notes was always specific, personal, things that Rachel would know about me. One said, "Your mom called the house. She's worried you haven't returned her calls. Call her." Another, "Remember, you promised Marcus you'd listen to his new sound design demo. Don't forget again." These weren't generic notes. They were reminders about things happening in my life. Things that only someone close to me would know. And here's where it gets worse. I started wondering, how long had this been happening? Had I missed earlier notes? Had someone been in our apartment before I started noticing? I went back through my memory, trying to think of odd moments. Doors that were unlocked that I thought I'd locked. Small things out of place. There was a week in September where Rachel said our back window had been left open. She thought she'd done it herself and forgotten. Neither of us remembered opening it. I didn't sleep well that week. On a Saturday afternoon, this was about 2 weeks after I first noticed the handwriting discrepancy, I did something I'm not proud of. I hired a private investigator. Well, hired might be generous. I found a guy through a friend of a friend in Brooklyn who did this kind of thing. Met him at a coffee shop, paid him cash, gave him copies of the suspicious notes, and asked him to analyze the handwriting, to tell me if there was any way to identify who wrote them. He looked at me like I might be having a breakdown, which, to be fair, I might have been. 2 days later, he called me. He said the handwriting analysis was inconclusive. The notes were too short and the handwriting was too good. But he did say this: whoever wrote them was deliberately trying to match Rachel's handwriting. The fact that they were close enough to fool most people meant it was someone who'd studied her writing extensively, someone with access to her documents, someone who lived in her space. The detective's real question was, has your fiancé been acting strange? I went home that night and looked at Rachel differently, really looked at her. She was sitting on the couch reading an architecture journal, her legs tucked underneath her. She had this small scar on her left knee from a skating accident in high school that she told me about on our 3rd date. She was humming something, a song I didn't recognize. She looked completely, utterly normal. "Rachel," I said, "I need to ask you something." She looked up, that genuine smile, the one that preceded her rare, real laugh. "Have you been worried about me lately?" "No," she said, and she meant it. "Why? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. "Just life stuff." But I wasn't fine. And I was starting to develop a theory that scared me more than anything else I'd considered. What if Rachel was the one writing the notes? What if this was all some kind of elaborate test? What if she was checking on me, monitoring my behavior, and the forgery was intentional? A way to see if I'd notice, if I'd become paranoid, if I'd start acting guilty about something? What if this was psychological? Okay, pause here for a second. If you were in Daniel's position and you found 4 or 5 forged notes in your apartment, you've hired a private detective, and your fiancé seems completely unaware of any of this, what would you do? Would you keep digging? Would you confront her? Would you try to catch whoever's doing this? Let me know in the comments what you would have done, because this is where the story splits into two versions of reality. I kept digging. I bought a home security system. Not a complicated one, just a small camera placed in the living room corner, positioned to see the entryway in the kitchen. I told Rachel I'd been reading about break-ins in our neighborhood and wanted to feel safer. She was skeptical but accepted it. She said I was being paranoid, but she said it kindly. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Just footage of Rachel and me, living our normal life, going to work, coming home, eating dinner together, having that weird quiet time where couples don't really talk but exist in the same space. Then on a Wednesday night, something changed. I was working late at the office. I'm a data analyst, which is as boring as it sounds, but it pays well. Rachel had texted me around 8 p.m. saying she was heading to bed early because she had a 6 a.m. client meeting. I said goodnight. I said I'd be home around midnight. I got home at 11:47 p.m. I reviewed the footage. At 9:34 p.m., our front door opened. The person who entered was wearing dark clothes, a hoodie, dark pants. Their face was obscured. They moved quietly, deliberately through our apartment. They went to the kitchen, then to the living room, then down the hallway toward our bedroom. The footage quality wasn't great. The camera was cheap, but I could see that whoever this was knew their way around our space. They moved with familiarity, not like an intruder, like someone who'd been there before. The footage cut out at 9:47 p.m. My security system's battery had died or been disabled. I rewound it, played it again, played it again. I couldn't see their face, but I could see their hands, gloved, dark leather gloves, and the way they moved. Something about the movement was familiar. I checked our bedroom. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was disturbed. Rachel was asleep, breathing softly, completely unaware that someone had been in our home. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch in the dark, waiting for the person to come back, waiting for Rachel to confess that she'd let someone in, waiting for the world to make sense again. When morning came, Rachel got up and made coffee. She kissed my forehead and asked why I was still awake. I lied and said I'd been checking work emails. She looked worried, not suspicious. Worried. Daniel, you need to sleep. You're going to make yourself sick. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and demand answers. Instead, I made myself a cup of coffee and went to work. And that's when I made a decision that I can't take back. A decision that changed everything. I called Marcus, not my therapist, not a lawyer. Marcus, my best friend, the person who'd known me for 23 years. I met him at the Copper Penny on a Thursday night, breaking our Friday tradition, and I told him everything. The notes, the handwriting, the security footage, all of it. I sat across from him in our usual booth, and I watched his face as I explained what I thought was happening. He listened. He didn't interrupt. His fingers tapped against the table. Tap, 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 that nervous habit of his. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "Show me the footage," he said finally. I pulled out my phone and played the video of the intruder. We watched it together in the dim light of the bar. Marcus leaned in close, studying the figure's movements, their shape, and their hands. "That's not Rachel," he said. "I know," I said, "but I thought maybe—" "And it's not you, obviously." "No." He sat back. He ordered another dark and stormy. Tony didn't even have to ask. "Daniel, there's something you need to know." My heart rate spiked. This was it. This was the moment when everything would make sense. Rachel's been having an affair, Marcus said, for about 3 months. I found out maybe 2 weeks ago by accident. She was meeting him at a hotel, and I was picking up a client nearby, and I saw them together. I didn't say anything because I wanted to make sure before I told you. But I've been watching. I've been following her to be certain. The bar went quiet, or maybe the world just went quiet. What? I managed. Her lover. I think he's the one writing the notes. I think he's obsessed with her. I think he's trying to drive you crazy. I think he's trying to get you to leave or do something drastic so he can have her. Marcus told me his name, James. Some successful banker she'd met through a client. They'd been meeting at the Marriott on 49th Street every other Tuesday afternoon. Marcus had documentation, photos of them entering and leaving the hotel together. He had dates, times, everything. And just like that, the scattered pieces of a terrible puzzle came together. I know what you're thinking right now. This seems solved. OP found out about the affair. The mystery person is the lover trying to sabotage the relationship. The notes were a form of psychological manipulation to make Daniel question Rachel, to make him doubt her, to make him paranoid and jealous so he'd push her away. It makes perfect sense. It almost makes too much sense. And it did for me too. I was relieved. Not about the affair. God, I was devastated about that. But at least the world made sense again. At least there was a rational explanation. At least I wasn't going insane. I spent that night driving around the city, furious, heartbroken, and confused. I went to the Marriott. I parked in the garage and sat there for hours, wondering if Rachel was up there right now, in some hotel room with this man named James. The next morning I confronted her. Not calmly, not maturely. I confronted her the way a person confronts someone when their entire understanding of their relationship has crumbled. "You're sleeping with James," I said. "That's what the notes are about. That's what this is all about." Rachel's face went white, but not guilty white. Confused white, hurt white. "How do you," she started. "Marcus saw you at the Marriott multiple times." She sat down. She was actually shaking. "I can explain," she said. And she did. The affair was real. That part was true. Rachel had been meeting James. But the reason was, it wasn't what I expected. James wasn't some wealthy banker trying to seduce her away from me. Well, he was a banker, but the affair wasn't about seduction. It was about me. Rachel had been working with James and a therapist named Dr. Mercer to stage an intervention, a specific kind of intervention. They believed I was experiencing some kind of break from reality, nothing severe, but something concerning. A pattern of anxiety that was getting worse. I'd been more paranoid lately. I'd been withdrawing. I'd been staying up late, and I'd been having obsessive thoughts about patterns and inconsistencies. So Rachel, James, and Dr. Mercer had come up with a plan. The notes were the first part. Forged notes, carefully crafted to see if I would notice the inconsistencies. They thought if I noticed, I'd bring it up. We'd all talk about it. I'd mention my fears and anxieties. Rachel would listen, and we'd book a therapy session. But when I didn't mention the notes, when I started obsessing in private, Rachel knew something was wrong, something deeper. So she contacted Marcus. He was in on it from the beginning. The following her to the hotel thing, the documentation, that was all arranged. They wanted to give me something concrete to find, a real explanation for the notes, a cause and effect that made sense. The plan was that I would find out about James and Rachel's meetings. I would be hurt and angry, and then Rachel would tell me the truth, that it was all orchestrated to get me to see a therapist. "We're worried about you," Rachel said, tears streaming down her face. "Marcus is worried. I'm worried. Something's changing in your mind, and we wanted to help you see it." She showed me text messages between her and James, professional messages, agreements to meet as part of this plan, a contract essentially that James had signed, understanding he was participating in a psychological intervention. She showed me emails from Dr. Mercer outlining the strategy. She showed me everything. And I felt simultaneously relieved, devastated, humiliated, and confused. There was no real affair. There was no lover trying to sabotage me. There were just three people who loved me, trying to help me, in a way that was manipulative and dishonest, but came from a place of genuine concern. Here's what I said to Rachel. I need to think about this. Here's what I actually did. I left. Not to think, to run. I packed a bag that night while Rachel was in our bedroom. I didn't leave a note. The irony of that is not lost on me now. I just took my keys, my phone, my wallet, and I left our apartment. I drove without a destination. I drove to a small hotel about an hour upstate in Rhinecliff, and I paid cash for a room. And then I did something that I haven't told anyone until now. I searched for the Reddit thread. The hotel in Rhinecliff had Wi-Fi. I sat in my room feeling betrayed and confused, and I searched Reddit for threads about interventions, about manipulation, about people staging their own disappearances to expose the people around them. And I found something, a post from 3 days ago, posted by someone named U/Rachel Architect. The title was, "My fiancé has disappeared, and I'm terrified. My best friend thinks I know something. Please help." The post was about Rachel. Well, about Rachel. But it was written from someone else's perspective. Someone claiming to be her best friend. Someone claiming that Rachel's fiancé, me, had gone missing on Thursday night. That nobody could find me. That I wasn't answering my phone. That the police were involved. But here's the part that made my blood go cold. The post described events that hadn't happened, not in reality. The post said I'd been increasingly paranoid over the last few months. It said I'd been convinced that Rachel was having an affair. It said I'd accused Rachel of cheating, and Rachel had confessed, a real affair, not a staged one, and now I'd vanished in a fit of rage. The post said the last time anyone had heard from me, I'd been talking about disappearing to make them realize what they'd done to me. The post painted a very specific narrative. A man who was mentally deteriorating, who was becoming abusive and controlling, who had finally snapped and run away. And it was signed, posted by Rachel's best friend, who is very concerned. I sat on that hotel bed, holding my phone, reading and rereading this post, because something was wrong with the timeline. Something was impossible. Rachel couldn't have posted this. Rachel couldn't have known I would leave. Rachel couldn't have orchestrated this exact narrative. Unless she could. Unless this had all been planned from the very beginning. I pulled up my search history on my phone. The notes were 3 weeks old, not 2. The handwriting analysis was a real thing. I had receipts for the PI's payment. The security footage was real. But the intervention? The affair with James? That was new. That was something that came after I'd already been spiraling. And suddenly I understood. I called Marcus, not to ask him questions, to tell him something. The intervention was real, I said, but it came too late, didn't it? I was already losing my mind before you knew there was anything wrong. There was silence on the other end. How did you? Marcus started. You're on Reddit, I said. Rachel's best friend account? That's you. You posted about me disappearing, but I didn't disappear. Not really. And if you're on Reddit talking about me being gone, then you've already accepted that narrative. You've already become part of it. Marcus hung up. I called Rachel. She didn't answer. I searched Reddit more. I found other posts. I found comments that Marcus had left on other threads. Comments that described his growing concern about my mental state. Comments that went back months. Further back than the intervention. Further back than the affair with James. And then I found something else. A post from nearly 4 months ago on a subreddit about relationships. The post was anonymous, but it was describing someone who sounded like me. Describing my nervous habits, my work, my patterns. The post was asking other Reddit users, is it possible to slowly make someone question their own sanity? And would it be wrong to do it if you think they deserve it? The post had been upvoted hundreds of times. The comments were supportive. People gave advice on how to gaslight someone, how to make them paranoid, how to destabilize them. The user who posted it? Someone with a username I didn't recognize, but whose posting history revealed something crucial. They knew details about my life that only a few people would know. Details about my relationship with Rachel, details about my work, details about conversations I'd had with Marcus. I did something I'm not proud of. I accessed Rachel's email account. I know the password. We'd shared it years ago when we were planning our wedding, in case something happened to one of us. I logged in and searched her history, and there it was. Emails between Rachel and someone named JX88 discussing a plan. A plan that started 4 months ago. A plan to systematically destabilize me, to make me paranoid, to isolate me from my own mind. The emails described every step, the notes, the timing, the way they'd escalate my anxiety without making it obvious. The goal was to make me doubt myself so thoroughly that I would eventually leave on my own. And when I did, they'd be waiting with a narrative that explained my disappearance. The narrative that I was unstable, that I was dangerous, that I'd snapped. But the most horrifying part, the part that made me actually feel faint, was why. Rachel had discovered something about me about 2 years ago. Something I wasn't proud of, something I'd kept hidden from everyone. She'd found messages on an old email account, messages to a therapist about intrusive thoughts, dark thoughts, thoughts about harming people I loved, thoughts that came unbidden and terrified me. I'd been in therapy for years to deal with those thoughts. I'd managed them. They were under control. I'd never acted on them. I'd never told Rachel because I was ashamed. But Rachel had found out, and instead of talking to me, instead of supporting me, instead of helping me get better treatment if I needed it, she decided I deserved to be destroyed. Rachel had recruited Marcus somehow. I don't know how. I don't know what leverage she had over him or what she told him, but the man I'd trusted for 23 years had become part of a conspiracy to destroy my mind. That was the real horror. Not that they were conspiring against me, but that I'd let them that close, and they'd chosen cruelty over compassion, that they'd chosen punishment over healing. Do you see what happened here? The false revelation, the affair, the intervention, the staged manipulation to get me to see a therapist, that was almost true. It was the story they wanted me to find. It was the story that made them look like they were concerned, like they were trying to help. But the real story was that they'd been planning to destroy me for months. The affair with James was a last-minute addition to their narrative, probably because they realized I was getting too suspicious, and they needed a more sympathetic cover story. The intervention wasn't to help me. It was to give them plausible deniability when I finally fell apart. When I finally disappeared, I didn't go back to that apartment. I drove instead to my mother's house upstate. I told her everything. Not the version where I'm a victim of an elaborate conspiracy, but the real version. The version where I have dark thoughts and a fiancé who decided punishment was the right response. My mother helped me hire a lawyer. That lawyer reviewed the emails, reviewed the Reddit posts, reviewed the text messages, and she told me something that, at the time, I didn't understand. She told me that what Rachel and Marcus had done might constitute criminal harassment, psychological abuse, possibly even a conspiracy. But there was a problem. The evidence was partially circumstantial. The Reddit posts were anonymous. The emails could be claimed to be taken out of context. And most importantly, I had no way to prove my state of mind. I had no way to prove that I wasn't actually descending into mental illness on my own. Rachel had been that careful, so we took a different approach. We didn't press charges. Instead, we did something else. We waited. For 3 weeks, I let everyone think I'd vanished. My mother didn't tell anyone where I was. I didn't contact Rachel or Marcus. I let the narrative they'd created play out in real time on Reddit. And I documented everything. I created my own account. I watched Rachel's posts. I watched Marcus's comments. I watched them worry publicly about my disappearance while privately celebrating that the plan was working. I watched them become famous on Reddit. People started following their story. People started theorizing about what happened to me. Some people thought I was dead. Some thought I'd been kidnapped. Some thought I'd run away with someone else. Rachel's story was compelling. Her best friend was her alibi. There were text messages and Reddit posts going back for months, all carefully crafted, all designed to show a concerned fiancé watching someone she loves deteriorate. It was a masterpiece of digital storytelling, and it was all fundamentally a lie. After 3 weeks, I did something that made it real. I made a post on Reddit, under my own name, and I told the truth. Not my truth necessarily, but the version of the truth that could be verified. I posted about the emails I'd found. I posted screenshots of the messages between Rachel and JX88, who turned out to be Marcus using a burner account. I posted about the plan to destabilize me. I posted about the false intervention with the fake affair. I posted about how the person I loved and the person I trusted most in the world had conspired to destroy me. And then I turned off my phone because I knew what would come next. I knew Rachel and Marcus would respond. I knew they'd deny everything. I knew they'd claim I'd hacked into their accounts, that I was fabricating evidence, that I was the real problem, that I really was unstable and paranoid. And they might even be right. Because here's the thing that nobody in this story wants to admit: I might be unreliable. The therapist found in my apartment, the dark thoughts, the intrusive content, the things that scared me so much I'd hidden them from the people I loved. Those things were real. Those things mean something. Rachel could claim that my entire narrative is a paranoid delusion, that I found innocent emails and misinterpreted them, that my version of events is a manifestation of the same mental illness that made her worry in the first place. She'd actually have a point, and that's the most brilliant part of what happened. Because whether I'm telling the truth or not, whether Rachel and Marcus actually conspired against me, or whether I've constructed an elaborate false narrative to explain my own deterioration, either way, I've been destroyed. Either way, my credibility is gone. Either way, I'm the person who disappeared because I couldn't handle reality. That was 8 months ago. I'm not living in my mother's house anymore. I've moved to a different state. I've changed my phone number. I've stopped looking at Reddit because, frankly, the responses to my post were a mix of supportive comments and deeply cruel people who decided my version of events was proof that I'm exactly as unstable as Rachel always said I was. Rachel and Marcus came out of it okay. Better than okay, actually. They posted their own response, a measured, thoughtful essay about trying to help someone with untreated mental illness and failing. It was empathetic. It was sad. It made them look like the reasonable ones, the people who cared too much and got burned for it. It went viral. Reddit gilded it. People left comments saying Rachel was a saint for trying. Marcus was seen as a loyal friend who'd gone above and beyond. I'm the villain in their narrative. And the worst part is, I don't even know if I'm the villain in my own. I've been in therapy since I left. Real therapy, with a real therapist who isn't in on any conspiracy. And my therapist has asked me some difficult questions. Questions like, is it possible that Rachel's concerns were legitimate and your interpretation of your own story is being colored by your understandable hurt and betrayal? Questions like, can we know for certain that the narrative you've constructed is the accurate one? Questions like, what does it mean about your mental state that you can believe both, that the people you love conspired against you, and that you might not be a reliable narrator of your own life? And I don't have good answers. What I do know is this: the emails were real. The Reddit posts were real. The plan to destabilize me may have been real. But what I can't know, what I'll probably never know, is what was in Rachel's heart when she decided to do it. Was it punishment for something I couldn't control? Or was it misguided love, a terrible, wrong, harmful response to genuine concern? Could it be both? Here's what my therapist finally helped me understand. The objective truth might be less important than what I choose to do with what happened. Rachel and Marcus broke my trust. That's a fact. Whether they did it with malicious intent or with good intentions doesn't change the fact that an injury occurred. But I could also accept that they were frightened by my mental state and they responded badly. Not well, not ethically, but understandably in a very human, very flawed way. The problem is, Accepting that requires me to forgive them. And I'm not there yet. Maybe I never will be. I've written letters to Rachel and Marcus, letters that I've never sent. Some of them are angry, some of them are heartbroken, some of them are understanding. I keep them in a folder on my computer, and sometimes I read them when I'm having a particularly bad day. The one to Rachel says, I hope you can forgive yourself for what you did to me, because I'm not sure I can forgive you, and I'm not sure that matters. The one to Marcus says, I don't understand how you chose her, but I understand why you did. That almost makes it worse. I haven't contacted my mother in 4 months, not because of anything she did, but because I don't want her to have to carry the weight of this story. I don't want her to have to be the person who knows the truth, if the truth is even knowable. I work from home now as a remote data analyst. I have a small apartment with very few personal possessions. I have 2 friends, and I use that term loosely because I'm terrified to trust anyone completely. I have a therapist. I have medication that helps on the days when I remember to take it. I have a life that is smaller and more cautious than it was before. But it's mine and I know it. The hardest part isn't the betrayal. It isn't even the confusion about who's telling the truth. The hardest part is waking up every morning and not knowing, completely and fundamentally, whether I can trust my own perception of reality. Did Rachel and Marcus really conspire to destroy me? Or did I construct an elaborate false narrative to explain why the people I loved couldn't love me back, unconditionally, without condition? Both things feel equally possible. Both things feel equally true. And I don't know which one I'm supposed to choose. There's no resolution to this story, and I think that's the most important thing to understand. This isn't a story where the truth wins out and everyone learns a lesson. This is a story where someone, or maybe multiple people, did something harmful, and nobody can definitively prove exactly what or why. This is a story that sits in my chest like an unanswered question. And I think that's actually more true to how real human beings experience betrayal. We rarely get to stand on solid ground. We rarely get complete clarity. We usually get muddied versions of events, mixed motives, and people we love doing things we can't forgive, but also can't quite explain. So I'm going to ask you something that I ask myself every single day. How well do you really know the patterns of your own life? How many decisions have you made based on information you assume to be true, but have never actually verified? How many people are in your life who could potentially reframe your entire existence with a single revelation? And more importantly, if you discovered that the closest people to you had conspired against you, how would you know you weren't just experiencing a break from reality? How would you know? I'm still trying to figure that out, and I don't know if I ever will. The last time I checked Reddit, Rachel's post about my disappearance had over 47,000 comments. Marcus's follow-up about the mental health crisis in America had been featured in 3 different podcasts. Our story was important to them. It helped them process what happened. But what happened to me? That's a question I'm still trying to answer. And the worst part is, I don't know if I can trust my own answer. If this story left you unsettled, that's intentional. Because the real horror isn't conspiracy. The real horror is ambiguity. It's not knowing. It's the possibility that we're all unreliable narrators of our own lives. And nobody can ever be 100% sure which version of reality they're actually living in. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments. What do you believe happened? And more importantly, why? Because your answer might tell you something about how you experience trust in your own life. Subscribe for more stories that make you question everything you thought you understood.